Greetings sailors, and welcome to the first part of this year's Halloween event, which is basically a rerun of last year's Halloween event. Now if you remember last year, well, it was the Transylvania escort mission, and that's what we have again this time, but there are one or two slight differences. The principal one you'll notice is that the Transylvania itself now has a healing aura of 30 hit points a second, which is weaker than in most of the other ops. When the ops first came out, I think both of the ones that had healing ships, effectively, it was at 50 hit points a second, so it's a rather slow heal, but now the defensive Newport station actually has a 100 hit point a second heal, which is really quite substantially better. So it's the same classes as last time. You might notice the replay actually has the proper names for them because I didn't record this live, but yes, as they are in the event, it's the Blade, which is the Wakatake, the Eagle, which is of course the St. Louis, and then the Jackal, which is the Nassau. And they each have a different role to play, effectively. The Eagle gets very high fire chance HE shells, but they're quite low damage shells. I actually was having more success in terms of doing direct damage with the AP. So basically with the Eagle, you want to try and fire some HE salvos to set fires and then switch to AP to actually do the damage, and that includes against the catapults. With the Jackal, well, you're kind of the tank of the team. The primary role of the Jackal, I would say, is taking down the catapults as quickly as possible, because the catapults are by far the most dangerous thing on the field. The Zikasas only have secondaries, and they only kick in at 4 kilometers, as do the Jackal's secondaries normally, but I actually spec'd for secondaries and put a secondary flag on to get, what is it, 5 kilometers exactly, almost, which I did wonder if that was a waste of time maybe, but at the end of this you'll see I got nearly 30k damage just from the secondaries, and it was just from the secondaries because the HE throwers have a 0% fire chance, as do the HE shells on the Blade. So yeah, you can obviously do some decent damage with these primary guns as well, but absolutely when you're playing this, the focus should be on the forts first and foremost. So the Eagles set the fires, get the ticking damage, and then do damage with their AP shells. This goes around just firing at AP at everything, but first and foremost the forts. And then the Blade, well, you've got very quick reloading torps. You've only got 2 sets of tubes, but they reload at a base level of every 20 seconds. And you can actually play around with that a little bit because you get 19-point captains with each of these ships as well. And because we have, due to the changes with smoke in particular, basically free captain resets at the moment, you can play around with exactly how you want those 19 points to be distributed. And that also means that, like the Dunkirk event, you can get some elite captain XP out of doing this as well. But well, you'll see at the end exactly how much XP it was worth. I was honestly a bit disappointed, so I'm not even bothering to put out the fire, and for most of this I just let the fires burn. Actually, it's only towards the end where it really sharply suddenly spikes in difficulty, which is exactly how it was last time. That part hasn't changed. The article does mention that there are more catapults and that they are harder hitting somehow, or they're more dangerous. I'm not entirely sure how, but they are nasty. They have a pretty ridiculous fire chance. I think somebody data mined it last time and discovered it was a fire chance in the hundreds of %. So it's almost a guaranteed fire if one of the catapults hits you, essentially. And if they hit one of the Blades, well, it does a really nasty amount of damage, and they do seem to focus on the destroyers if those get spotted. So this is why, if you're in the battleship, you take down those catapults as fast as possible, because the Blades are actually fairly important damage dealers because they have those very, very quick reloading torpedoes, and they can stack flooding damage potentially. And you know, if you've also got fires going from the Eagles, it all adds up. I don't know why I kept bumping into the Transylvania, although this is a fairly frantic mode, I have to say. Probably not so much as the new one that's following after it, which is, you know, like a direct follow-up essentially. But even so, yeah, it does get fairly frenetic in places, especially towards the latter part. So we're travelling around the north side of that island. That can randomise to be either north or south, but the actual spawns seem to be fairly fixed. You can tell, by the way, I don't have manual secondaries on this. I did put AFT, but no manual secondaries, because then you wouldn't get the glorious sight of them firing from each side. You also get a pair of Zikasas, you can see them actually there on the minimap, that spawn back towards your original spawn. You can basically ignore those. They're a bit of a trap, I think. I think they're put there to try and lure players back to tackle them. But you can get the secondary condition, there we go, that's what I'm looking for, just from the stuff that you will face spawning in front and around you. The ones, those two that spawn behind you, you can ignore them. They'll never catch up. I don't think they ever get into gun range unless you let the Transylvania stop for a significant period of time, at which point you've failed that secondary condition as well. I should note, you know, this is going to be a successful 5-star completion of this, but this followed 4 complete dismal failures, so it's quite tough. Don't expect to get this on the first go. You have to have a group of people, if it's a group of random people, who are all doing the things that they need to do in the particular ships that they are in. And if you have, for instance, jackals that are firing HE at things, that's probably not a good sign. They haven't figured out that you know, AP at the catapults kills them very quickly. Hell, even a good broadside from the Igor of AP into the catapults, I think it's like 3,000 damage per shell, because it essentially is the Citadel damage equivalent on, you know, on a ship. If you get a good salvo, you can still take off a good chunk of health, but you will not be able to put them down nearly as quickly as the jackals can. So we're on to whatever wave this is that just kind of spawn around you. The key to winning this, it absolutely seems to be just killing things as quickly as possible. Having that priority, that order of targets, depending on what ship class you're in, and then just focusing fire and putting things down ASAP. Because once you get to the bit where the Rasputin ship spawns, which is Imperator Nikolai, if there are still multiple other Zikasas around you at that point, you're probably going to fail. Because there's just going to be too much firepower, too many targets around you. You need to have everything else out of the way so you can focus hard on those final spawns. Because it's not just the Rasputin, they come along with another pair of Zikasas. So we're all doing fairly well so far. We've got enough ships keeping in the circle at all times, which I think you have to have at least one to keep the Transylvania moving. And I'm not sure if it's still the same this time, but I seem to remember last year there was a mechanic where the more ships that you had in with the Transylvania, the faster it travelled. I'm not sure if that's the case anymore. It may not be. So, getting just all of the frontal citadels, but then it's basically Mikasa armour. This is why the Igor guns, you know, they're only 6-inch throwers. Throwers? That's definitely how you describe naval guns, yes. They're only 6-inch guns, but I mean at the ranges you're firing at against effectively Mikasa armour. That's why I was setting fires with HE and then switching to the AP. So I think on the Igor it's actually worth having the expert loader skill, so you can switch that bit quicker. And there we go, we get one of the blades laying smoke. The smoke screens have definitely changed. I think last time it was just the standard default smoke screen. This time around, well, it's still not particularly long lasting smoke screen, but the laying time is a lot longer. So you can lay, especially if you've got several blades, which you usually will have, or at least my experience playing this on NA is that there were usually at least 2 blades per team, and there are kind of limits of how many each individual ship there can be per team. Yeah, if people are using their smoke effectively, you can shield the Transylvania quite effectively, but the downside of that is you have to try and predict the path that the Transylvania is taking, which is not always 100% obvious, but it doesn't tend to take any wild turns unless there's a ship blocking it, or unless you're trying to do like I was doing earlier and just ram into it repeatedly, which doesn't seem to do any team damage to it. I think like the other ops, I mean last time round I think team damage was a thing, or am I misremembering? But last time it was a special mode, and this time they've put it in as an operation. Now that framework is in place, and I think like other operations, you can't do team damage, but I might be proved wrong. Maybe somebody in the comments will say, actually, Jedi. But I don't think you can, which is quite handy when you've got those very fast reloading torpedoes flying all around. So we're doing a pretty good job so far. We're just putting things down quickly, and as I said, that's the key. It's absolutely focusing and taking those things down. And the secondaries, I mean, as I was playing it, I was thinking, is this just a pretty light show? But no, and as I've said, they do contribute a bit of damage even if they're not actually setting fires, and I think that's because, again, the Mikasa armor is not particularly good, so it'll be more the HE secondaries than the AP secondaries, because for some reason you've got a bunch of AP secondaries which don't particularly do anything. But it was like 30k damage, which is not bad. And when you see my total at the end of this, which is not going to be, it's going to be okay. I don't think it's going to be anything too spectacular. Not that the damage number actually matters that much, but the proportion of that will have come from the HE throwing secondaries. BFT might even be worth using on this, actually, just to get the faster rate of fire from the secondaries. I don't know, I might experiment with the captain loadouts a bit. In fact, that's the thing I could do at the end. I could put the captain loadouts I've set for each. I'm not going to guarantee that they're great captain loadouts, but they're ones that I think fit reasonably well. Fire prevention, I mean, on the Igor and this, the Jackal, are an absolute must, and it's probably quite a good thing to have on the blade as well. So you've only got 3 fires that can possibly burn instead of 4, because if your team's not doing a good job of taking out the catapults, those fires are nasty. Those catapults, I think, can set multiple fires. So, because we're not surrounded by Zikasas, I mean, we've taken out the one of the supporting Zikasas already, and that leaves us free to more or less focus entirely on the Rasputin. Now, that was the closest I came to putting my theory that there's no team damage in this to the test, but yeah, he's focusing on other things right now, so this would be a bit risky if he was firing at me at point blank range. He might even just delete me, because the Nikolai hits incredibly hard and it has a lot of health. But if you've taken care of everything else, just with the sheer amount of firepower you're putting into it from basically everything, and that's another reason why this was a good run, is that we had lost only 1 ship at this point. Nearly everybody was alive, and part of that was because we were taking things down quickly, because we were taking the catapults down quickly. So the more firepower you have available, the better. So a couple of citadels in there, and he's just absolutely withering under this barrage of firepower. And will I get the kill? Well, not very fast if I do. And I think somebody else actually, there we go, somebody else actually does, but he kills the Bakatake that killed him. But that's it. The Transylvania actually survived with more than 50% hit points, which is one of the conditions, and I think that was in part due to the use of smoke. So if you're playing the blade, don't neglect to use the smoke for the Transylvania. It's not just for you, it's actually to lay in the path of the Transylvania, and it's a lot more useful than it was last time, because it lays for a lot longer. And yeah, as long as everybody's doing everything they're supposed to, which I think with an organised group of people, because you can, as with a normal op, you can take out a full division of 7 and coordinate properly. It would be a lot easier, but doing it with randoms is just going to be luck of the draw, really. So this was the disappointment at the end. You get 25,000 Elite Captain XP, a whole bunch of Halloween camos, and for the 5th star you get a day of premium. But the actual XP and credits were a bit disappointing. I mean, the credits is actually not too bad for a win. It was, what, something like 150k plus, which, getting a decent amount of damage in one of the previous ops, you can easily do over 200k credits. 143, there you go. But it was the base XP that was really disappointing, and I don't know if that's because these are effectively tier 3 ships. I've gotten, have I even had a 2k operation before? Maybe. You can get decent XP with 5 stars in the other operations, but in this, even with 5 stars, we only had 2 people that just got over 1k XP, which is a bit disappointing, really. So it feels quite stingy in that regard. I'm not sure there's really an incentive to go and play this one over and over again, in part because it's got its own special ships, but even the promise of grinding out some elite captain XP is kind of tempered by the fact that you're not going to get a lot of it, because you don't get a lot of XP from this. So yeah, that's a bit disappointing. I'm kind of hoping that part 2, the follow-up, the, what was it, something Sunray something, I can't remember what it's called exactly, but the one that follows on immediately from this, effectively, which will be around in a week's time as of me recording this video. Yeah, hopefully that gives better XP rewards, and maybe it will, just because they're tier 8 ships. Or maybe they just didn't put any kind of XP booster on these. But either way, that was quite fun, and it's certainly a challenge. You know, it's relatively smooth for the first part, but if you lose too many ships, then it can get very, very rough all of a sudden, and at that point it's actually quite difficult to complete it at all. So yeah, thumbs up though, I quite enjoyed it. So that's the first part of the Halloween operation, and now you know what to do, hopefully. And if you found this video useful, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below pointing out any mistakes or things I might have overlooked. You can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.